This is my first YouTube video ever, so it will be awkward, but we shall crack on. Right, so I've just released my first sewing pattern. I'm no means an expert. I've tried my very best to make a beginner-friendly skirt pattern. It's called a Cottagecore skirt, and I will link it down below. That will take you to my website where you can purchase the PDF pattern, and it will likely be on offer by the time I release this video, so I'm not sure how much it will be. You'll find out, click the link. Anyway, right, so for this project you will need fabric. I'm going to use this red double gauze, which is lovely and soft. It has a lot of drape and it has pretty much no stretch. It says when you download my PDF pattern, you'll get a instructions PDF that comes with it, and it will tell you all this information: what fabric you need, how much fabric you'll need compared to what size you are. It also tells you the measurements for each size, so I probably wouldn't go with your normal dress size. I would just measure your waist and your hips and then follow the instructions. You can't get it wrong. You will also need matching thread, and then either a sewing gauge or a ruler will work just fine, and then some fabric scissors. I like to use a rotary cutter for when I'm cutting out the pattern, but you can use scissors. You will need pins, and you also need buttons. No, you need 8 buttons. I only have 4 because I need to order 4 more, but I was just showing you an example. These are self-cover buttons, so they will be covered in the fabric that I bought. However, you can just use any old button. And you need a sewing machine, obviously. So yeah. Okay, so open your pattern in Adobe Reader. There's a couple of steps here that are really important. So when you go to print, you need to make sure that it's 100% custom scale, or you can click actual size, but it can't be to fit or shrink or anything like that. Another important thing is you want to print on both sides of the paper, because if it's on double sides then it won't work. And choosing paper sourced by PDF page size, don't click that. I had that clicked by accident once and it went really weird. Before printing the whole pattern, I recommend only printing page number 1. This is so you can use the test square to make sure it's the right size. As long as it's measuring 5 cm by 5 cm on your ruler, you should be absolutely fine to print the rest of the pattern. Once you have all your pattern pieces printed, get rid of the first page, you won't need that anymore, and just spread out all the pages and you can get sticking them together. So here we have A2, and the next one will be A3, and so on until you get onto row B. You then just need to stick them all together. So basically just take one of the pieces, fold a side over, or you could use scissors if you wanted to. I'm just showing you folding here, and then stick them together as you'll see me do in a second. So stick all the A pieces together, stick all the B pieces, all the C pieces and so forth until you finish all of your rows, and then stick the rows together at the top sections of each pattern in the same way, and you just have to match up the diamonds and the lines as you go along. So you'll see me do that here. I'm just sticking it together and I'm being really, really careful to make sure that they don't overlap too far and that they are completely lined up. Okay, now is the time to actually cut your fabric pieces. So lay your fabric down on a really large sort of flat surface area. It's probably not ideal to do it on a brand new carpet like I'm doing here, but this is probably the only real space that I can do it in my house, so yeah. So fold your fabric piece in half horizontally so you can see both of the grain edges when you lay it down. Usually you would fold pattern or fabric for patterns vertically, but not with this one, so yeah, do it as I'm doing it. Lay your pattern down flat as possible and use whatever you fancy to keep it down. Some people use proper pattern weights, however I'm just going for books here because make, do and mend is my mantra. So yeah, cut out as carefully as you can, make sure you're following lines and you don't slip. I am obviously super speed here, it's not real life. But yeah, so once you've finished all of that, the big skirt, you can cut out the waistband and Bob's your uncle. To start your skirt hem, I recommend setting your machine stitch length to the highest possible setting. On my machine that's 4, but it's totally dependent on the machine you have. Then you want to sew along the entire bottom edge of the skirt using 1.5 cm seam allowance and carefully following the circular edge. Your machine may slightly gather the fabric, as you can see in the video here, but if it doesn't, then you can do this manually when you've finished the stitch by pulling the bobbin thread and moving the fabric along. I wouldn't gather as much as you normally would for other garments, this is just to help you with the skirt edge. I ended up actually having to remove a lot of the gathers that you can see here in the video. Take your skirt over to the ironing board and now you can start to pin the hem together. Starting at the left end, fold the hem over by 1.5 cm and press. You will need to fold over again another 1.5 cm, and as you do, adjust the gathers to ensure you keep the curved edge on the hem. This may be quite fiddly, so take your time here, pressing and pinning as you go along, hiding the raw edge completely. Remember to pay attention to the right and the wrong side of the fabric. Unfortunately, my fabric is exactly the same on both sides, so it's quite hard for me to demonstrate here. But you want to fold the fabric towards the wrong side of the skirt, so the front won't show any of the folded fabric. Make sure when you get to the bottom placket later on that you fold towards the wrong side as well to match. Don't forget to set your stitch length back to a normal setting before you start your hemline, and always remember to backstitch at the beginning and end to ensure your hem doesn't come undone. You want to stitch as close to the edge of the fold as you can, but be careful not to come off the edge. This hemline will be visible on the skirt, so take your time with this and follow the curve as you go. Very carefully with your unpicker, you can go ahead and remove the gather stitch. I mean, if it's completely hidden away and it's not causing any issues, then you don't need to take it away, but mine's pulling the fabric quite a lot, so. To create the button plackets, take your skirt piece over to the ironing board. You can start on either end and you just want to fold the entire length over by 3 cm. Press and then fold again, making a total fold of 6 cm. If you are using a really thin fabric, you can always lay a strip of interfacing inside the placket, but that's completely up to you. Use a ruler to make sure you keep it even the whole way, and remember to fold in the same direction as you did on the bottom hem. Complete this process on both sides of the skirt and pin in place. This is now the perfect time to check the fit on your waist and decrease or increase the folds as needed. Remember, you'll need to adjust the seam allowance on your waistband later to match if you do make any adjustments here, but I've gone into more detail on how to do this on my PDF instructions. If you are stuck on anything or need any clarification on this, you can always drop me a DM or an email and I'll be happy to help. I forgot to say at the beginning, you need to use interfacing for your waistband. So this is the waistband piece that I cut earlier, and this is my interfacing. Now I'm using sew-in interfacing. You can use iron-on. Iron-on is probably a bit easier, but I'll basically just be cutting the exact same size piece in the interfacing now. Okay, so with your material attached to your interfacing, whether it's sew-on, if it's sew-on, I've just stitched really close to the edges so it will be hidden, and if it's ironed on, then you don't need to worry, you just need to iron it so it sticks. Then you want to fold it in half lengthways and iron this down. I wouldn't press for too long on your interfacing, some of it can melt. This one's not too bad. Okay, and then you want to get your sewing gauge or your ruler, and you want to fold back one length edge by 1.5 centimeters. So, right there. And then you want to press in place. Now you can put the odd few pins in just to keep it where it needs to be. Make sure you only pin it that side there. I've accidentally gone through on that one. So do that all the way, but you only want to do it on this side, not the other. Doesn't matter which, unless you've got some sort of preference with how your fabric looks on one side. Once you finish pinning, this is what you should have, something similar to this. I've done a really poor job of putting my fabric on the interfacing, but it doesn't matter because the interfacing is straight, so I'm just going to follow that line. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to be sewing one line here
and one line here. Now this pattern is made to do 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, so that if you didn't change your button placket at all, then we're doing 1.5 centimetres up there and there. But if you folded it one more time, another 3 centimetres, and so you had a total of 9 on each side, you would so that's an added total of 6, so you would have to add 3 centimetres on, because you added 3 centimetres on each side, so we want 3 centimetres here and 3 centimetres here. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, if you did nothing to the size of the skirt, keep this at 1.5 centimetres away. If you added on another 3 centimetres on each side, take away 3 centimetres. So we're doing 4.5 total.
Before trimming your seam allowance, just roughly check that your skirt will fit inside the waistband, because trust me when I say it's a lot easier to redo a seam when you still have fabric left to play with. Once you're happy, you can go ahead and trim the seam allowance on both ends. After you've trimmed the seam allowance, turn your waistband right side out. Turn it upside down and pin the non-folded side along the edge of the skirt. Sew the waistband to the skirt with the normal 1.5 cm seam allowance. Make sure you keep the rest of the waistband completely out of the way so you don't risk sewing over it. Fold the waistband over the skirt and tuck the raw edge into the waistband so it's completely hidden. You then want to pin in place so the seam line is also hidden. Once this is done, take out the pins one by one and put them on the front side of the waistband as you will be top stitching it. Once all the pins are in place, you're going to top stitch as close to the seam line on the waistband as you can. This should ensure the waistband is securely sewn with no raw edges on show. Okay, so now you're ready to finish off the skirt. You can use my guide for where to place the buttons, or you can decide on your own. It's completely up to you. I have placed my first 2 buttons much closer together than the rest of the buttons just to keep it more secure around the waist, but if you'd rather have them all even, then that's fine as well. I'm using a tailor's pencil to mark the locations. I always sew my buttonholes before I place the buttons. Now if you've never created buttonholes before, then I recommend looking in the manual for your sewing machine. Or alternatively, you can search specific videos for this on YouTube, but remember each machine is different. Always practice on scrap pieces of the same fabric before sewing this. You can unpick buttonholes, but it can get very messy, so I wouldn't recommend doing your final buttonholes until you've completed a few on scrap that you're happy with. I find the easiest way to ensure I place my buttons in the correct place is by opening up the buttonholes and pinning the skirt together on my mannequin. I then use a tailor's pencil to place a mark exactly in the centre of where the buttonhole is. If you don't have a mannequin, then you can also do this by laying the skirt flat on a surface. Once the buttons are completed, your skirt is finished. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you love your Cottagecore skirt. Don't forget to tag me on Instagram @TailorDressmaker so I can see all the beautiful things you create.